Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Gateway API. Remember that this meeting is governed by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, which basically boils down to be nice to one another. We'll get started on the agenda in just a second, but if there are any new faces that are interested in introducing themselves and just kind of saying hi and talking about what you want to get out of this meeting or just that you're just hanging out, please feel free. We'll give a couple seconds for you to pipe up.
Hi, I'm Dave Sudia. I'm from Ambassador Labs. We're on the steering committee of Envoy Gateway, which is implementing the Gateway API. And I want to learn more about the Gateway API and get a little deeper into that. So that's why I'm here.
Sweet. Welcome.
Thanks.
Yeah. Anybody else? I think I see a bunch of new, maybe a couple new. You don't have to, but if you want to just say hi and like why you're here and what you're trying to get out of it. And also for anybody who's in here who hasn't put something on the agenda but would like to, it's kind of a full agenda, but do feel free to put your item on the agenda. If we have to bump it, we have to bump it, but feel free to add that in. All right, let's go ahead and look at the agenda then. All right. All right, today, December 5th. All right. Candida, you wanted to talk about conformance tests. I think this is the issue you just opened today.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. My name is Candace, by the way. That's my GitHub handle. Get Candida.
Yeah, sorry, Candace.
That's okay. Yep. So let's see. We did discuss this in Slack a little bit, so I probably don't need to spend too much time on it in the call today. But I'm doing conformance tests for TLS route pass-through. I just went through the code and came up with a list of 28 conformance tests, and it turns out that what I'm really testing there is just API validation stuff. So I'll need to whittle down that list. So the first question's answered. Do we need all 28 cases? No. And I'll just take a second look at them. And let's see. Yeah, one of the questions I had was, can the gateway listener protocol be HTTPS instead of TLS for TLS route? I think I tried it with HTTPS and it didn't work for me. Didn't work until I made it TLS, but it looked to me like the specs says otherwise.
That field is completely underspec'd at the moment. I would say that it's that right now it's kind of those are suggestions for the implementation rather than a properly spec'd field. So it's going to be very implementation specific. Yes, I 100% agree we should fix that. But like for now, I think that so I think that for now it's probably fine to just say something like it's allowed in the spec, so like we won't stop you from working like necessarily, but I think it's probably also we could probably just say we suggest that you should just set it to TLS for TLS route or like recommend maybe or something like that for now, and just assume in the conformance test that it's TLS for TLS route and then update the spec later once we've got the conformance test to back it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure. Just as long as I'm not missing something that was a tribal knowledge or something.
Yeah.
So the third, I guess, is do we need tests for terminate as well as pass through TLS mode in this suite, or can we address it in a separate compliance suite?
Seems like you do it in the same one, right?
I mean, I don't really understand the use case for terminate in the case of TLS route because, like, the whole point of TLS route is that you're using the SNI and stuff that's in the TLS negotiation, not actually unwrapping it. Like, you shouldn't actually need to unwrap the packets. And in fact, I would go as far as to say is unwrapping the packets is weird. So that's why I would say no. Let's not do terminate things for now and wait and see if anyone actually needs that use case. Sorry about the planes.
Yeah, I think that one is one in the Go docs that we'll need to address then, because I think it's an option. It allows for both of those options.
Yeah, and so I think Mike put in the chat that pass through is also another relic like TLS mode that's like kind of weird. It's a bit duplicative. I think some of the stuff around TLS mode and like pass through and terminate and stuff like that is kind of from before. In the API we had the really strong distinction between HTTP route and TLS route, and so like it predates that a bit, and so like we're kind of stuck with it now. But I think that we can get a way out of this situation by either being very specific about what, like, over specifying rather than under specifying, and being very specific about about what TLS modes are valid with what route types, and then the same for the and then that way we say and the same for the protocol field. Like TLS route is only valid with TLS, end of story. Pass through is only valid with TLS. You can't do terminate with TLS route. Lewin asks, is it true you can only specify certificates in TLS route? No. So TLS route is intended for when you're passing through the TLS stream to a backend pod that has its own certificates. So supplying certificates in the gateway or in the listener there is kind of weird. Rob.
Yeah, I think there's lots of understandable confusion here, because we did for a short time have certificate refs in routes. And so there was a time, alpha 1 of the API, where you could specify a certificate route and attach it to a route, a certificate ref and attach it to a route. I'll get there eventually. We removed that and tried to provide some guidance on how you could do that with some kind of automation where you could tie a certificate to a route via some kind of controller, right? That would say, okay, this certificate belongs to this gateway, so I'm going to attach it up to this gateway, because that's effectively what was happening anyways. TLS route, I think, kind of like what Nick was already saying, was just it's a way to route based on SNI. That's it. There's no special capabilities beyond just what it's routing on. But I get that that's confusing, and any help with our docs on that. I know our TLS related docs are very confusing right now. So if anybody has some cycles and wants to help make them less confusing, that would be amazing.
In fact, there's an issue already open for that, I believe.
Awesome, thank you.
Dig it up.
Yeah. There's
The
probably
TLS mode.
I was just about to say, sorry, if anyone does want to work on that, feel free to hit up me or Rob on Slack to sort of, we can have a chat about the tribal knowledge required there to sort of give you the background and fill in, to sort of understand why things are the way they are. And so you can explain to people, this is weird because of history. Here's what we're doing to work around it, basically, is kind of what I think we need to do there.
Roger that. It sounds like one potential action item, in addition to kind of the grander scheme of redoing the docs, would just be to specifically remove the references to terminate, at least for now, until somebody comes up and says this really needs to be a feature. Yes? No? So I can't see anybody, so I'll just assume.
All right, yes. So yes, I would say that's a plus one for me. I think that having TLS mode terminate, we could even just, to be honest, the easiest thing to do is probably just to say TLS mode is deprecated, and has no effect. Like, that's probably it's difficult to remove field like that from the API because it's technically a breaking change and thus needs an API rev. But we can just say this has no effect. This should have no effect.
I think I missed some context here. What was the rationale for deprecating terminate?
So I mean, I think it's that. No, sorry, you go, Shay. It's better that you explain it, I think.
I mean, it seems as simple as we don't know anybody actually needing it. We don't understand the use case, like why somebody would need that in TLS route. So consider it out of scope. like bring it back in scope if somebody comes around and is like, yeah, we definitely need this. Here's our implementation. We need to do this. But until then, why have it? Why not
So,
just
so this is limited to the concept of TLS mode terminate plus TLS route.
yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I agree. That does not make any sense.
Not now. I don't.
Yeah, not yet. Sure.
I don't see anybody. I can't figure it out in my head. So
Yeah,
back
it
around
almost
to it.
feels weird to terminate and then but still route on S and I
yeah,
if you
it
have
seems like
more.
I mean, it
seems like
almost makes
the
me think
only
of like
thing
an
would be
old school like Apache web server configuration where you have like multiple different things where you want to terminate on SNI, or you want to like route based on SNI to a different backend app or something.
because if you're not using HTTP, I mean HTTP will let you do this, right? So like I think the insinuation here is that you have like a TCP route. I don't know,
Yes.
sometime later.
So
All
yeah,
right.
I think TLS mode terminate with a TCP route is probably okay. But like, yeah, for TLS route, no. But yeah, like, again, that feels like a thing that we should be more explicit about. Sorry.
Yeah, roger that. Okay, so we had a good discussion. We have one action item, and we also have that kind of follow-up general issue about making the documentation here better. Was there anything else, Candace, that you were looking to get out of this?
Just one more question. In the case, so for TLS route, is it supposed to be possible to specify more than one host name? And if so, how would you suggest we handle SNI in that case?
To clarify, do you mean specify more than one host name on TLS route or on gateway?
On gateway.
Yeah, I think it's consistent with what we've done with other routes where the routes can match any number of host names, but each gateway listener, if it specifies a host name or SNI, it can only be one.
Oh, I'm sorry, not the gateway, the TLS route itself, where you can have multiple host names under the spec.
Yeah, so I think that is still consistent with what we're doing with HTTP route. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the question.
So can I have a crack and see if I understand what you're...
Well, let me put it in context. I'm creating. I'm at a point in the code where I'm adding certificates to just test a normative case, and I realize I've only done it for one host name. I've only added one certificate, but then I realize that host names can be multiple in this case. So do I need to iterate over host names and add additional certificates? And is that going to be something that would work, or does it seem weird or normal?
So I think personally, the way I expected that to work, sorry, planes are flying over my house a lot this morning. The way I expected that to work is that the inclusion of a host name in the host names field in any type of route is not a must match all host names. It's a must match one host name. And then the logic that Rob was talking about is that it also is, there's like a supersetting arrangement where if you have a host name at the listener and a host name in a route, then there's a binding that needs to happen between them, and that they either need to be exact matches, or the listener needs to be the route needs to be like a subdomain that's covered by a wildcard on the listener.
Okay.
So yeah, but so I think in terms of like TLS route, if you've got like 3 host names in there, then that means that as long as the request matches like any one of those, it's up to the TLS certificate to be like, does the certificate handshake complete, right? Like I don't think we want to be in the business of having to unwrap certificates, like implementations having to unwrap certificates to say, does the certificate you've given validate, with all the host names you've given? But like, Yeah, you see what I'm saying? Like,
Yes, yeah, that makes sense. Sorry, it was kind of a dumb question in the end.
no, it's not a dumb question at all because the spec is not clear like on this. But I think the key part there is that the host names field is an any match, not an all match. If you
Right. Okay. Got it. Thank you. I'm all
So
done
is
with
there,
this. Thanks.
okay, is there an action item here to improve the clarity of the documentation so that the next person that comes along, Candace, will like get to where you got, but it'll be more clear?
The documentation, you mean of the conformance tests or of
the
TLS?
spec, the field, the host names field, I think is.
Yep. Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Was like improving the host names field in such a way that it can give a hint about this. Sound like a good action item?
No, I think it was just I hadn't thought it through properly, and probably no one else would have this question.
No, I wouldn't be surprised.
I had this exact question the first time I looked at it too.
Really?
Okay, maybe this
Yeah.
is an AI then. Yeah. Okay, so
Yeah,
improve
there's an AI for sure, Shane, I
spec
agree.
to give hints about this to implementers. Okay. I mean, I'll put this.
If you want to take the
now.
action to make an issue, then that.
Yeah, I'll make the issue for it.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. That issue is really great. To be honest, like, if you ever feel like it, like, that'd be awesome if we got an issue like that for everything. I mean, at least then we can be like, this is ticked off by, validation. This needs a conformance test. Like, if anyone else wants to do a really good exercise to really get to know a particular route type really well, then doing something like Candace did, where you go through like all of the possible error states and stuff like that, is a really good way to really like grok how a route works. Yeah, so it was top work, Candace. Really good.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate it. All right, we got a couple of good actions out of that, and we got that other issue for kind of general reform. And thank you for implementing, Candace. I'm sure it'll help to kind of head this thing in the right direction and mature it. All right, so moving on to the upcoming meeting schedule. I think Rob is suggesting these two are canceled and wants to know about this one.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I know for myself personally, I will not be around on December 26th or January 2nd. I imagine that's likely true for many or most people on this call. If anybody, as always, if anybody wants to meet, more than welcome to. But I think those are safe to cancel. The December 19th, I will be around. I just wanted to put a feeler out to see if anybody else would be around if we had a call.
I will be there.
I will also be there.
Cool. All right. That simplifies that. So we'll keep on going with December 19 and plan on canceling 26th and 2nd.
I would actually suggest, because hopefully we should have 060 out by then. And we're in the sort of the wind down period where there's not going to be as much stuff happening. I'd actually suggest let's try for another agenda light meeting where people can bring questions and stuff like that. I thought that was really useful, and it was a really great chance for us to just have a bit of a like more office hoursy kind of thing. I think that would be really nice, especially we got lots of people, lots of new people who probably have tons of questions, and I think that it would be good to be able to drop the tribal knowledge as we need, and try and make it less tribal.
You meant on the 19th?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. It's not worth trying to start a big new thing on the 19th, that's for sure. So just open agenda is a great idea. So, and thanks again for running that last time.
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, really good questions from everyone.
Cool. All right, moving on. This will be a real quick update of Bleakst, which for the uninitiated is a layer 4 load balancer built with Gateway API and eBPF and Rust for the data plane that we are using to build like basically a reference implementation of Gateway API that will be used for conformance tests and demonstration and stuff like that. It is being donated, so there's now a an issue open to get it donated. The discussion in the email thread so far was no problems. It is kind of interesting because I think it is the first repository in Kubernetes SIGs that will be predominantly or heavily Rust. So that'll be kind of neat. And one other thing that we were trying to do, Andrew's not here, but Andrew and I were talking about, we've had, I think you can see from the repository now that there's like quite a few contributors, and there's a couple more that aren't even counted here yet, that are kind of like hovering around the project and interested in it. So we are talking about throwing together kind of a informal paired programming session kind of thing for it. So if you're interested in such a thing, I think we're going to start posting those in the Gateway API Kubernetes Slack channel. And it would just be like, it's not specifically for Blixt, but like that's what we would kind of start with, because we've been doing those with like a group of small people, and we want to make it available to anybody who wants to jump in. So just be on the lookout for that. And if you're interested in general, please feel free to ping me on Kubernetes Slack. All right. Nick, PR review speed. You're not happy with PR review speed.
I think it's more like, I feel like I'm letting everyone down because I'm reviewing things too slowly. And so, I think that, there's really sort of three of us who are the main reviewers. This is because we have, like I said, the best problem. Like, we've got lots of work coming in. We've got lots of people interested. We've got people, doing lots of great work. And I don't know about anyone else, but I have a day job as well. And it can be tricky to keep up with all the Gateway API stuff, especially to give big reviews like the API review the attention they deserve. And so it'd be really good if we could increase our pool of reviewers. Rob's already talked before about having a better contributor ladder. And so, Rob and I mentioned, I think we talked briefly about, maybe we need to start talking about like having our own SIGs, essentially, and of which, or working groups or whatever we want to call them, but like Gamma would be the first one probably. And then, start having people, having people gain approval rights over the docs or the API or conformance or that sort of thing, so that you can focus in on a specific area and, be a reviewer for that. I think there's a couple of people who've spent heaps of time doing great work on the conformance tests that probably know more about the conformance tests than I do, that would be far better off reviewing PRs for the conformance tests than I am at the moment. I think the more that we can do that sort of thing, the better. As I think the last thing that Rob added to that is that you don't need to have a formal role to help with reviews. Just doing reviews and saying, this looks good to me is really useful even for me even. That was what I wanted to talk about here.
Yeah, I'll echo everything that Nick said here. We are overloaded. I apologize that we aren't getting to, I know I have some reviews I've been meaning to get to for longer than I'd like. And my GitHub notifications are just out of control. And so just anything, we have a lot of great people helping us out with Gateway API, making contributions. If you feel like you are interested in, climbing a contributor ladder, there are, I can't say this for every Kubernetes SIG or whatever, but I'd say in Gateway API, we have just endless opportunities to fill in gaps and to, make it to maintainer, there's a very clear process that we can develop here of becoming a reviewer, becoming an approver. We have so much, and that doesn't even count the various sub-projects of Gateway API, which includes Ingress to Gateway, soon to be Blixt, and I don't know what else. But there's endless opportunities to help out and to have a formal leadership role in Kubernetes org. So we are working on formally defining what that looks like. I don't think anything's going to be too surprising, but please, if this is something like you're interested in, definitely reach out.
Yes, please.
I guess the other thing I just want to reiterate there is, this was also me saying sorry, the same thing that Rob did. Sorry for taking a long time for a lot of these PRs. And I think the other concomitant here that we've had is that 060 has taken us a lot longer than any of us would have liked to get out, because we've had a whole bunch of, this has been a classic case of you turn over a rock and you find another like 3 rocks underneath it, and so it's taken us a long time to get to 060 because we've been trying to fix things properly and set ourselves up for being able to go faster in the future. The more people we have that can help, the faster that sort of stuff will be in the future too.
One thing that's a little confusing for me, and this is probably particular to me, Keith, and John, is that I seem to be getting like auto-assigned PR reviews that are like due to the like gamma whatever where I am in the like owners thing, that I do not have the context or understanding to like know it if I should or if it's sufficient. So anything we could do to like scope the owners file to like areas of the code base or like a code owners or something like that. Because like I'm happy to help with PR reviews on conformance tests, for example, or gamma stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that I get auto assigned to that I don't understand well enough to feel confident reviewing.
Yeah, I agree. And I know why it happens, and it's it's unfortunate, but my understanding is because gamma leads are listed as project-wide reviewers, and reviewers are the bias to be assigned first as a reviewer, and then it goes to approver next. You get a lot auto assigned to you, which is not efficient for whatever.
I would love to help with more than I do currently, but right now it's too wide a net, and having it more focused would make it more easier for me to like actually do more.
That makes perfect sense. I've been kind of thinking personally that it might make some sense to have a gateway-API-gamma repository, mostly for GEPs, and then like things can come back to the main API as like PRs. It's just a thought that I've been having because it'll help to kind of isolate the gamma stuff quite a bit, let people focus on gamma, let people that want specifically to like contribute to gamma.
I think another way of looking at that too is that GEPs right now are very gamma focused, and I think any GEP that isn't explicitly gamma focused is still relevant to gamma. So even if we just put all gamma leads in GEPs directory and conformance, those two things are pretty closely tied.
With normal code owners, you can make it so that certain people have basically just responsibility for that directory.
Yeah, exactly. And we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. In that case, that would be totally sufficient, I think. Maybe we just have a gamma directory for GEPs.
And there's one other thing that I've seen in upstream Kubernetes where there have been some bots that will look for keywords in a PR and label appropriately and then determine reviewers based on those. But as a first step, just sensible directories. That's very easy to do. That seems like a good starting point. So we're not just assigning a bunch of PRs to people that it doesn't feel like the right fit.
9+1 on that.
Yeah, and label filter. Thank you, David. That looks very relevant too.
Oh, neat. Yeah, I didn't know about that. Candace also asks in chat, is there a way to get a prioritized list of waiting reviews? Yeah, right now, no. I think that probably that's going to need human intervention for a while to sort of add priority labels to the to reviews. But I think that feels like something that where Rob, Shane, and I can work on doing that for things that are higher priority, like stuff that's blocking 060. We can sort of add our priority high or something like that label to those reviews, and then
I think roughly what we've done so far is anything that is blocking 060 milestone gets in that milestone. And so that's like, if anyone has cycles work on anything in that milestone, then we have an 061 milestone, which is, coming up as soon as we release, and then an 070, which is eventually. So I feel like that's basically taken the place of priorities. It's
Yeah,
not,
that makes sense.
as I'm thinking about it more, maybe we should move to priorities because anyone can label priorities. Right now, I think only maintainers can set milestones.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
anyone who's a
important.
small member can label. So yeah, that makes sense to probably move to using labels. I think having the milestones is super useful for us as a burn down. I think. Oh, okay, thanks, Mike.
Yeah, it's a nice organizational thing.
Yeah. I mean, we should do it anyway, but yeah, I think that it'll make it easier if, if people can say, hey, priority. I think let's take a while to consider the priority levels thing. But I think for now, the sort of action item list for anybody who wants to help with reviews is look at the milestones for now. Rob, Shane, and I will maintain those milestones for the next little while until we figure out some better process. And then, but yeah, look in the milestones. Yeah, thanks, Shane.
Yeah, the two can complement them each other. You can definitely have like priority labels and milestones where they complement each other. So the milestone is like, we're saying we're only working on this milestone, but there's high priorities, but the high priorities and the other milestones don't interact with those until that milestone is basically in cycle. So I don't know if we want to do things that way, but it could work. All right, so I put that as a consideration for next time. Just make sure we remember to consider priority labels. This could be helpful for people, it sounds like. I lost my place here. Oh, nope, I lost my place again. Here we go.
Yeah, it's about to move. Yeah, that's
Okay.
it.
So if everybody's on board with that, I can bring up at the Gamma meeting tomorrow if they have any problem with that, and then we just go with that. Does that sound good? We just talk to them and see, like, before we just executively do it, just say, hey, we're thinking we'll do this. Sound good?
Yeah, that works.
I think we got Mike and John here, so that's two. And Keith is here too. So.
And yeah, okay, John is here. Okay. Oh, everybody's here. Okay, so do you just want to do this? Sorry, I can't see the Zoom at the moment.
Yeah,
Do you just want to do this?
It sounds like it. So yeah, let's just go forward with it. You can assign that one to me. I don't mind taking it. Well, though, if you're doing it, I'm not going to get in the way.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can take it if you want. I was just going to do it.
No, I will not volunteer for more work. Then that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I know there's already a lot
chosen
going on,
wisely.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, at the end of the day, I did take a couple things. So yeah, it's like smaller things though. All right.
Feel free to send it over my way if it ends up being too much. I don't care.
I think that one's going to be teeny tiny.
So. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So all right. V060 update. Oh, I'm sorry. Did anybody have anything else to say on this topic before we move on? We have one action item, which is specifically meant to help it. It's kind of focused on Gamma, but should take a chip out of it. And then we'll continue to follow up on ways to make this better. All right, that's what we talk about. V060. Go ahead, take it away, Rob.
All right. So I know many of you are probably looking for a final V060. Thanks to Nick for releasing RC1 last week. Hopefully some of you have had a chance to try it out, and hopefully it's mostly worked. But please take some time to run conformance tests, anything else you can with the release candidate. That's what it's there for. We really want to get as much feedback as possible in the next few days. Generally, the way things work is, we're trying to run through a whole host of feedback from Tim and Cal as SIGNet API reviewers. Once that's complete, we'll send out a RC2 usually, and then usually a day or two after RC2, we hit the final release. Again, we are really kind of relying on implementations to take this opportunity, run conformance tests, test it out, ensure that we haven't done something especially stupid here. Please let us know before we hit the release on V060, which really gives you this week at most to let us know, ideally the next few days. Yeah, and so I linked over to the actual PR that's getting all the feedback from Cal and Tim. there's a lot of comments. Shane took the first PR to get a bunch of fixes in. I've got another PR that should merge shortly. Richard has another PR for gRPC related fixes. Lots and lots of changes going on here. But I'd still say we're only a little over halfway through this PR. Hopefully I'm pessimistic there, but there's a lot of comments that I haven't had a chance to get to yet. So my request here is, I know many of the people on this call are interested in getting 060 out as quickly as possible. This is the thing that's in between us and that release. So if you are able, if you can help us out by running through some of these comments, if you see some that say, hey, I can take that, I can fix that, just comment and say, hey, I'm taking this and it's yours. The more people we have working on this, the faster we can get a release out. And, I think we're all very invested in getting a release out in the next week or so.
Please do.
Yeah. And so I'll just highlight a couple of things that I think are worth further discussion here. If you go back to the agenda just briefly, Shane.
Yeah, I was looking for, it was actually related to this. I was looking for GitHub can tell you when people are using you as a library. I was wondering if that could help us. I don't think we have that turned on right now, but so is anybody using this package util translator thing? I think we could actually, like, GitHub can tell you that, but while we're on here, is anybody using it?
We were interested in using it, but have not yet. What's the context? Is it that it needs to be tested or it's going away?
There's some potential
Yeah, so
desire to make it go away,
that's it basically. The comments from Tim and Cal are basically these seem really simple. Is anybody actually using them roughly? And if they are, can we use generics instead of rewriting this a million times? And so I feel like everything we have in translator was potentially more useful earlier, but I don't know that it ever took on. And it's kind of a lot to, it's net new in 060. And so we're kind of having to formally decide, is this something like we want to support going forward? Because once we add it, we kind of are stuck with it. I am having trouble coming up with a really good reason to leave it in. If anyone feels strongly and wants to keep it, I would appreciate some help on that PR to help address the issues. But because the overarching theme that I'm seeing is just, do we need this at all? I would prefer to just drop it. Like my default right now is just drop it. But if somebody wants it, I can be convinced of that. I just, again, need some help on that. I'm pretty
sure the Contour is using it. So Contour contributed originally. And so I'm pretty sure Contour is using it. I'm not 100%. Envoy Gateway may be using it as well. It's been a little while since I looked at that part of the code. So yeah, I think those are probably the people to check with.
Isn't there somebody new from Envoy Gateway in here today?
I
don't know if they.
That'd be me. I can ask.
Yeah, I wasn't.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to put you on the spot necessarily. Sorry.
Yeah, I wasn't going to drop you in that, Dave, because I know I haven't looked at that code for a long time, and so it's a pretty detailed question. So,
but I can ask.
Probably want to do like a follow-up on this one because this is kind of important to like get done as soon as possible. So I think there's an action item here to say somebody just needs to like check in with these groups. Dave, you're on Kubernetes Slack.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a thing in the Gateway API channel saying, hey, we need to know who's using this because we need to change it around a little bit. Can you reply here if you are?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically, do we take the time to clean it up and dramatically simplify it? Or do we drop it entirely since it's never been released to this point? Those are basically the options we have.
Okay. So
For
checking
what it's worth,
Kate,
we don't
Flask,
care
and
either way.
Alice.
Like
Sorry, what
we
was
have
that?
a lot. Oh, sorry. For what it's worth, we don't care either way. We basically have a lot of the same very similar logic in our code base already, which I'm sure other implementations that aren't using these yet have the same. So it's just a matter of like, do we keep the stuff we have or do we move over to this? So no strong opinion.
Interesting. Okay. Does anybody else want to take up the action item to kind of check in Slack and poke around with some implementations about this? Other than me?
Oh, I can do that. It's fine.
Thanks, Nick.
Oh, and yeah, Dave,
I got other Nicks in here.
feel free to hit me up with anything that anything as well. Yeah, that's fine. Just leave it on me.
Cool. Okay, so we got an action item for that one. We will kind of reach out a little further. We have 2 implementations we want to check in with. HashiCorp doesn't really mind either way, but they're potentially going to use it. So the next bit was validating webhook cleanup.
Yeah, so this is one that I just wanted to highlight because Cal spent a bunch of time going through our validating webhook cleanup, and this is one that does not, none of his comments feel particular. Some of the comments in this PR take some thought, and I'm not sure, why did we do this? I'm not sure. A lot of these comments that I highlighted are just, we could clean this code up in our valid. So this is the reason I'm highlighting this is it's the kind of thing that anybody with really no background on our API can just jump in. If you've written Go code before, you can jump in and try and address some of these comments. So if you're looking for a place where you can help out and jump in, that's where I'd recommend starting. There's, just again, comment on any one of those and say you want to take it or a set of them, and they'll be for you. But again, please, if you are going to volunteer for these, please feel relatively confident that you can get them in the next few days, because we are trying to get this out soon.
Yeah, and do what Rob was saying before. Please do put your add to the comment so we don't get 2 people working on the same thing. Say, I'm going to take this.
Yep. Cool. That's all I've got. Any help is always appreciated on this, but yeah, thanks.
Roger that. All right. We have 15 minutes left, 14 minutes left. Dave, questions about policy attachment? Okay.
Yeah, I kind of posted for Knative, our ambition is to use a gateway API so we don't even have to touch any implementation specific resources. But then when I saw we're tracking like retry policy as one thing, and kind of saw got lumped into like, oh, well, you know what, we can't tackle this problem now. So what we prefer is implementations have their own policies and attach them to like different objects within the thing. That's fine for end users or operators, but like as a platform that's trying to like create these things programmatically, it's like a huge pain, because then it's sort of like, well, we're trying to get away from programming implementation specific resources. So one thing I was kind of wondering is like, does it make sense? Well, this is sort of solutioning. Does it make sense to have sort of like generic shapes for certain policies that we could create? That's like one random idea, because like we don't want to go back to the world of like, I need to create an Istio policy if I have Istio installed. I need to create a Contour policy if I have Contour or Envoy Gateway, right? Like it's
yeah.
Yeah.
So to some degree, that is what we kind of have. So have you, just to make sure, you've seen like the bits where we try to give like at least a loose outline of how the attachment part of it should work, right? So you're asking for like something a little deeper than that. Is that what we're getting at?
Yeah, it still feels like you need to create some non-gateway resource in order to affect like for example, retries or timeouts and stuff like that.
So
Yeah.
I think today we're kind of making that into something that is implementation specific, but it's not out of the question for that. So like the way the API works in general, which you may be fully familiar with, but just to kind of go over it, is we have different levels of conformance, and what policy ends up being is like completely implementation specific stuff. If we find commonalities in some of these things that would belong in many implementations, or at least some implementations, we could put that up the stack into like extended conformance and stuff like that. But I think we've just started here. Does that
So
ring true with you, Nick?
yeah. So there's some background here. And that's one of the reasons that we have policy attachment is that at one stage, Rob and I sort of sat down and tried to figure out how we could write a struct that would describe timeout policy across any implementation. It is impossible. It is not possible to reconcile timeout policy across different data plane implementations because they all slice. So say you've got like total client timeout here, right? Like, or something like that. They all slice the timeout into different chunks, right? So there's like, Envoy will have like timeout from client to Envoy, timeout from Envoy to backend, timeout from backend back to Envoy, and like, or something like that. And then everybody slices in a slightly in a different enough way that you can't just give timeouts like in a straightforward way. So one of the reasons that we are in the situation where we're like, oh, this is all implementation specific, is because we haven't been able to find enough commonality to be able to make something that works across enough implementations to make it work. Probably retry policy is more tractable, I think, because retry policy is going to be a bit more described, like more common between implementations. Timeout policy is literally the example I use because it's one of those ones that seems like it should be a completely solvable problem, but it turns out not to be. And so I think probably the best case scenario we can end up with for timeout policy, for example, is that there's like a data plane specific versions, right? Like, so an Envoy timeout policy and an Nginx timeout policy and something like that because of implementation details. My intent here with policy attachment is that what I would like to see is people make policy objects that are implementation specific, and then us try to take a couple of them once we have a couple of implementations, do them and try to find what's common between them, and then build a gateway API extended conformance object. That is sort of the hope and the dream, that we can take things from implementation specific to extended, and then if everybody supports it, to core. But like the problem with a lot of policy attachment stuff is that it is very implementation specific, and the settings are different based on the different implementations. Rob.
Yeah, and that was exactly what I was trying to get at before. So sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up, and Nick actually ended up saying the same thing I was going to say at the end. But yeah, I think there's a lot of room here for data plane specific policies. I talked at the last KubeCon, I talked with a few different people that were interested in a generic Envoy branded set of policies that work for all Envoy implementations of the API. I think that's approximately 80% of implementations seem to be Envoy based right now. So that would cover a pretty large chunk. Would be interested to see where that goes. But again, unfortunately, because different underlying data planes have different configuration, we can't just, force everyone to be able to communicate the same thing. And Nick's example of timeouts, they are surprisingly different depending on whether you're talking to Nginx or HA proxy or Envoy or whatever else. And so a truly generic thing there was sadly impossible. And I imagine there are going to be other things that also, as much as we want to get as much as we can in the core API, there are some things that just won't fit.
For your purposes, Dave, in like wanting this, I think this is one of those situations, based on everything we just said here, where you may need to be part of the change that you want to see in the API. Like you getting more involved in, and you're welcome to, and we'll be like happy to help you like get more involved in being a voice for this and for the specific things that you want, because we're going to need help to start moving those things into extended. We've already covered a lot of ground in this API over the last few years, and we're starting to get to these edges where it's going to take, you know, individuals who are strongly motivated to kind of tease these things out, especially if we want to get more things like policy attachment things that we've traditionally thought of as implementation specific, and start seeing if we can at least get them into, like, for instance, that group of implementations that use Envoy and so forth. So
I think Bowie was up next, Bowie, and then I got something to say, so I'll put my hand up.
Yeah, I do. Hopefully, you can hear me. So one interesting thing is, I see you as like a user, is to understand what your requirements are, because one of the difficulties we faced is that we could come up with specific, for example, timeout policy for specific implementations, but it was unclear what way to abstract it so that it would be portable. So I think it would be really good to hear from your side what you see as a usable subset that could potentially be generic. Because that was something like, as the implementers, right, we have less insight into how useful is it. If we genericize this aspect of it, is it still remain useful, or do people just see it as like, oh, this is kind of not useful for me?
Yeah, it's funny. I think Nick was highlighting is like, I find you jump to timeout because it's complex, but like I would say right now, all I care about is just being able to turn off retries, which seems like very straightforward.
See, that is a much more tractable problem as I said. And so, like, yeah, turning off retries, I think, is probably easier. I mean, I haven't looked into it like I did with, like Rob and I did with timeout. Yeah, so I think it's definitely worth spending some time to have a look on that. But I think it's really important for me to be clear that overall, my aim, what I would like to see at the dream is that there are standard policies that are part of a Gateway API, right? Like, for the things that we can do that for, absolutely, I want to see like a retry policy or something that is a member of the Gateway API group. Maybe it's only extended, but right, that we take the things that we can make generic enough and bring them into the Gateway API group, just like you were saying, Dave. So, like, yeah, that's I just want to be super clear that yes, that is definitely like a personal goal for me. You know, in terms of the policy attachment stuff. Yeah, sorry.
I think the other thing that might be interesting to think about is because I've seen the slides from, I think, like 2 KubeCons ago, when you're talking about like the gateway conformance as in being like a sphere with smaller spheres. And I wonder if the simpler thing for some of these policies is more not necessarily like it comes to the core, but it can be an opt-in. So the idea of maybe this just belongs in extended then, but like if there is a type of policy that applies, then implementations can kind of, this is what I mean by having the same shape to begin with. Like maybe retry is a simple one to start with first. But I do agree with you, knowing all the client side and also server side timeouts that are in the Golang server. It's like...
yeah. So so I think retry does seem like a more tractable one that would be really good to get to try to have a crack at. Yeah, I think that the sort of the definition in my mind of extended is it lives in the Gateway API, like in the repo and under the API group, and we have conformance tests for the behavior. So those are sort of the, you know, if we can have a retry policy that is implementable across like a majority of implementations and we make it extended, that's 100% fine with me. That's what I would hope to see. Extended just means is implementable by quite a few implementations and is able to be tested, you know, and so those are the criteria for moving to extended.
That's a good clarification.
I think since we're running pretty low on time, and I would like to get to our last agenda item or so, how would you feel, Dave, about an action item for this one being, would you mind putting together a discussion on, like, GitHub discussion where you kind of tease out some of your thoughts on this, put in a little more details about some of the things other than just like turning off retries that you'd like to see? We can kind of work from there and see if maybe some of these things we can, you know, over time start to build up into something that would be extended.
Yeah, I can start a GitHub discussion.
Yeah, I'd love to participate in that because, like, my personal interest in being here, I'm coming from the end user world before where I'm at now, and it's like I want to make sure that like we get feature complete at some point with all the things that I would have used as an end user. So I'd love to participate in that.
Sounds good. And then since we're running low on time here, we'll follow up on that GitHub discussion. SRAM Paul, you have questions about multi-cluster support.
Yeah, hey. So I'm not a regular member of this community, and I had looked at some multi-cluster functionality several months back, and at that time, Gateway API had been demoing some multi-cluster topologies using service import as backend references to routes, and the service import is referring to the multi-cluster services API. I just wanted to reconnect on this, and I was at a meeting, Shane, with you a few days ago, and you mentioned to kind of just bring it back to the agenda of one of these meetings to see where things stand. So I just wanted to check on, could somebody briefly summarize the status of multi-cluster gateway API support, and in particular in the context of multi-cluster ingress, but eventually could also be for multi-cluster east-west. So are we still expecting the use of things like the MCS API and the service import backend, or are we more inclined to multi-cluster support via sort of mesh service backends, like Istio service backends? What can somebody summarize the status of this area of functionality?
Yeah, this is a big interest area for me personally. I am hoping in the next couple months to spend some time formalizing and documenting what we recommend as the intersection of Gateway API and multi-cluster service API. I think those are the easiest APIs to answer that question for. I think we definitely want to have a clear, well thought out approach for those APIs. I know that, GKE, we already have a product based on multi-cluster service API and gateway API. I know that there are others in progress by other implementations. And I'd love to just clearly document what that should look like across the environment, the ecosystem. The mesh question is a little bit more open-ended, and we have some Gamma maintainers on the call here, but I know we're also at time. But I am very interested in how Gateway API interacts with multi-cluster and mesh. It's easier for me to answer the multi-cluster service because that's already a well-defined Kubernetes API, but multi-cluster and mesh is not well-defined in Kubernetes yet. And yeah, I'm very interested too. I don't think it's been discussed very much.
So yeah, I'm happy to help, do my part to work with you guys to take this forward. And I guess the summary of what I think I'm hearing from you is that both leveraging the MCS API for multi-cluster backends, as well as potentially leveraging mesh service backends, both are options still on the table, and some amount of further clarification would help.
Yeah, I've got to drop, but I'll say real quickly that multi-cluster service is much clearer to being defined than anything else. But I think there's broad interest in both. But with that, I've got to run, but you can keep on discussing.
Yeah, so I'm happy to chip in and help as needed to move this forward.
Sounds good. I think since we are past time, we'll probably try to wrap up here, but there is this discussion about multi-cluster mesh in particular. I guess for now, though, there's not really much of an action item for this part. If you want to be specifically involved, I would say, not to do this to Rob, but ping us in Gateway API. He's, I think, the person most interested in this. So ping Rob about this in our Gateway API Kubernetes channel on Kubernetes Slack, sorry. And kind of keep the thread going over the next couple months as this starts to get teased out.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I think that's all we have time for today. The last couple of things I think were just some really basic stuff. So thank you everyone for coming. We will be here on, go ahead.
The 12th. I was about to say, yeah, so we'll be here next week on the 12th.
Be here next week on the 12th. The 19th will be a kind of town hall free form meeting. So just so you're aware. See you all next time. Cheers.
Thanks.